Good afternoon, all. Let me start by saying welcome to those who are attending our webinar this afternoon. It's actually a rainy day, and that's how it's going to be probably in Atlanta for the next 2 or 3 days. I'm Nazira Dawood. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Vendorship. It's great to have all of you here. Thank you to our speakers today, Alex Johnson and Chantal Herbert, who are lending their experience and expertise in the legal field. Business law, right? So we hope that our discussion will contribute to meaningful and constructive discussion today. You do have the chat box where you can chat in the questions, and we will go through those at the end of the session before we log off. So we are happy to have our Vendorship team who are working very smart and very hard. We have Madhu moderating in the back end, Susan, Seema, and Sabina who have joined us as well, who will be putting you some poll questions for you to answer. So thank you, Chantal, and thank you, Jordan, for being here this afternoon and taking the time out of your busy schedule. I'm going to do a brief introduction about you, and then we're going to ask a general question at the beginning, and then we'll go into the core discussion. So, Chantal, you are working at Taylor & English, but also you are special to Vendorship because you are our Chief Legal Officer as well, and you helped us a lot, believe us. We are so comfortable with you being at Vendorship, so I just wanted to let you know that, right? And so you do, as I was telling you before the start of the session, I feel both of you are very young, very accomplished and accomplishing, and you have the whole world in front of you. So we want to wish you luck out there, and go rule and stand for the right and justice. So so Chantal, you are also an experienced attorney. You wear several hats. You're also in the several community activities as well. Outstanding Atlanta class of 2016 honoree for State Bar of Georgia, and you are you have the expertise on labor and employment law section. So we are very happy to have you here, Chantal, this afternoon. And Alex, oh my gosh, you are one of the dynamic person I know. Alex, I know many might not know you or might know you even after this, but someone they should get to know you, of course, Alex. You are with Bernard and Johnson, a law firm which you joined probably a year and a half ago, and your office is based out of Dunwoody right now. And you are a mediator, also you are a registered mediator with the Georgia Commission on Dispute Resolution, apart from many other things that you've represented, such as wrongful incarceration, victims of shootings, wrongful arrests. Oh my gosh. And you are also you represented parties in Georgia in both state and federal courts. So Alex, wow. And Chantal, wow. So that's a lot of accomplishment. But as I said, lawyers usually coming from our part of the world, which is coming from India, we usually want to stay away from lawyers and courts. But you don't get the privilege to do that always, especially if you are a business owner or if you are in small business. So let me start by asking you this question, Chantal. Tell us one lesson you've learned during this lockdown period.
One lesson that I've learned is that we're really very flexible as a society. I think if you would have asked anyone in February of 2020, could the majority of office positions be done from home? People would have said no, but we've learned that they can, and that you can continue to function at a high level and really get work done and serve your clients, even if you're now in your home office most of the time.
Definitely. And Alex, how about you? One lesson or one skill might be that you've learned during this lockdown period?
Well, I think the skill and lesson that I've seen from this, and it sort of reaffirms something that I think attorneys have to deal with all the time, is that risk tolerance is something that's very key to law, especially business law, but it's something that most of the population, I don't think, was really used to assessing. I mean, it's like a lot of people are now venturing out, even though it's risky with COVID, even though at the beginning, I mean, those same people were refusing to interact with others. So, I mean, I think that learning risk tolerance is something that I've learned. I think a lot of people are having to learn due to COVID.
Okay, while we have you on, Alex, why don't you tell us about your office, or can you share a little bit about your career path to your current position?
Yeah, sure. I actually graduated from law school back in 2010, right when the housing crisis was going on from Georgia State. I worked for a small firm called Gillis and Creasy for a while that did litigation, both plaintiff side, some defense, represented some businesses, and then I went off on my own a few years later. Was on my own until about a year and a half when my law partner and I started Bernard and Johnson. And all the time I've been representing people wronged by businesses or in car wrecks or the government. And I also represent a number of small business clients with their issues, which is, I think the litigation side is very useful in helping people avoid risk. But I've done that. I've been very involved in politics in Georgia, and yeah, I've done a lot, but it's been a good fruitful career.
Very nice, and everything comes through experience. So sometimes it's not written all in the law book. You learn a few things from your own experience as well. So Chantal, tell us, what do you enjoy most about your profession, or what do you find most frustrating as well?
I would say I'm a people's person. So what I love about practicing employment law is that I get to help businesses, whether they're small mom and pop shops to Fortune 500 companies, really interact best with the best asset that they have, their strongest asset, which is their people, right? And so I get to help them, tackle tough issues dealing with employees. And again, as a people's person, I love interacting with everyone from the janitor to the CEO. The frustrating part is that, people do take things very personally that sometimes aren't personal in the employment context. And so just trying to take the emotions out of it, sometimes for both the employee and the employer, can be challenging.
Very nice. And Chantal, I've always seen you smiling, and I know usually lawyers are a little bit less smiling. I don't know. I don't want to generalize, but I was like, oh my gosh, Chantal must be getting less challenging clients. She's always smiling. So now I know why, because you put the emotions out of what is going on with the professional life. So that's a very good lesson for all of us to take up. How I want to ask this question to both of you. So, was there anything that surprised you both about what you do, either unexpected, good or bad? If you can just give us one instance each. Alex, anything that surprised you to the last 10 years, good or bad?
Well, the most surprising thing isn't really in a business law context. It was more in the constitutional rights arena. When I got out of law school, I really, I was very sort of idealistic. I very much thought that it was all about who was right and who was wrong. And, if you violated the law, that was it. But then I learned very quickly that for a lot of things it was negotiation, especially with businesses and personal injuries. But then constitutional rights, one of the first cases I dealt with was someone who got pressure washed in jail on camera in Middle Georgia. And that was back in 2011. And of course, that made me realize the system that I thought was, all about like everybody acted appropriately. I realized very quickly that there are some bad actors out there, and that it's, as an attorney, it's important to be able to hold them accountable. So I saw some of the constitutional rights violations going on well before some of the recent news stories, and that shocked me to the core. I had no idea that was going on.
Okay, so good to know. Alex, how about you, Chantal?
I will answer similarly, in that as an employment lawyer, I did not realize how many characteristics people take from childhood into adulthood, and just the level of things that people say and do on their jobs, in their work email, on their work cell phones, use, on company time, on business trips. I just thought that, people grew up. And people don't. And so when I speak with, when I go and speak to like middle schools for like career day, I'm like, people do the same thing you do as adults. They're just different consequences, like termination, from your job. Just different consequences as you grow into adulthood.
Definitely. And let's hit back to our core discussion. As corporate counsel or law firms, sometimes are under significant pressure, right, to deliver either because of your leadership with setting goals, for cost effectively and efficiency, but also from your clients, who are the main component of any business. So alignment of those legal services that you provide with your business goals as well as for the clients to achieve success is a huge alignment is a huge factor, right? So either through process, technology, or even the business model that you follow. But let's talk about, just before we get into the core discussions more further deep, let's talk about business law, right? What does a typical business lawyer do? And I know, I mean, even though you are an employment law and you manage a lot other things too, Alex, from your perspective, can we just go a little bit further into what does a business lawyer do, Alex?
I mean, what I do, and I deal with a lot of small businesses and organizations, and also the plaintiff side of some of the employment type situations. I think a lot of it's managing risk and doing so in a way that is appropriate for the client. I've drafted non-disclosure agreements before that were very, very strict, because that's what my client wanted. It may have scared off some potential partners, but that is what the client wanted, because they were afraid of the other parties. And I think that a lot of times it's just making sure that your goals are in alignment with the client's goals, because I still remember one lesson that I learned very early on is that lawyers are very much be able to point out the safest way of doing something. And that's not always the best way to make money or even naturally work. So I think that being like Chantel and being a people person is important, because you got to be on the same level as your client. Because if you aren't doing what they want, you aren't really serving them well, even if you're giving them all the law.
Very, very good. So, Chantal, I know you had a huge smile there, but tell us. So, can I say there are like two types of lawyers: one who attend courts and one who are preparing documents, or can there be lawyers who do both?
Lawyers can do both, but they're basically called the lawyers who do mostly just contracts and deals are called transactional lawyers, and most transactional lawyers do not want to be seen dead in the courtroom. They do not want to litigate. They do not want to go to court. But then litigators, whether it's employment or contracts or constitutional rights issues, litigators are who usually will file and defend the lawsuits and be in the courtroom.
Okay, good. So good to know that. Let me ask about international law. I know you're saying you're dealing with mom and pop stores, small businesses, and sometimes corporates. And now global reach is as easy as just getting on to the internet and selling something far off in far west, right? Or far east. So how do you go back and look at the law books to learn about international law, or is it just comes by as you start practicing?
I will tell you from my practice, it is very hard to keep up with international laws. Laws change every day. Just keeping up with the laws in the 50 states and U.S. territories can be challenging. So usually what we will do is, my firm has attorneys in different states, but not abroad. We will usually find a good referral of someone in another country to partner with, who specifies in whether it's somebody trying to do a deal, or somebody having employment law, or they're trying to buy real estate in another country, just to make sure that they have someone who already knows the law. Because what you don't want to do is pay for me to learn, real estate law in India, because that's going to cost you way more money than me just finding a good real estate lawyer in India. And so those are, we usually will defer to partnering with an international lawyer.
Definitely. So, Alex, did you have anything to chime in? Because I'm sure then the intellectual property, or the patent, or the trademarks or copyrights come into flow. But then, how do you manage that internationally?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Chandel's comment is that if something goes international, that's something where I would talk to an attorney internationally. I haven't had that happen, but I mean, the thing is, was just knowing from in Georgia, if what usually happens is there's a lot of customs and norms that you can advise the client, like this is likely to happen, this isn't, just because we know what goes on here. I mean, especially in something like employment law contracts. But you start talking about, employment law in Europe. I mean, I mean, the amount you even just see on the news about, people going on strike and the entitlement to be employed. Like I wouldn't know the first place to start in avoiding an issue there. I mean, I was advising some, company in France that probably start a riot. Like,
Right.
good to get
Definitely.
international lawyers.
Got it. Okay. So, Chantal, so Vendorship was started almost 2.5 years ago, and I can tell you, I don't know if I'm ashamed to say that, but or if I'm, normal. This is what happens, that we really don't have a business plan yet, but we are working on it. Number one, right? So again, a small business owner starts a business. For them, documentation is in the back burner, right? For them, what do I do next? What do I do? How do I get the first sale? How do I make the first sale? How do I keep the revenue going? How do I pay the team members? So these are the things that goes on. Documentation, saving documents, and this record and that record is really not in their mind. So for those who are starting small businesses or who are already in business, why can you tell us, Chantal, why is it important to keep business records?
Oh, it's absolutely important because, what you don't want is to get into a dispute, whether it's a contract dispute, an employment dispute, and you have no records and it's your word against their word. And that really, number one, that becomes very costly because, if I think you said this and you think you said that, we're both going to litigate it, for as long as we can. So just having documents, having records. And again, it might not be a complicated system, but get your own filing system, get a filing cabinet and say, you know what, we're going to have these 5 documents in everybody's employee file. And we're going to get a payroll company. A lot of small businesses, they get into trouble with payroll. And it's like, you can hire one of the payroll companies for 30 or 40 bucks a month that will do all the accounting and record keeping for you. And it will save you a lot of money on the back end.
Okay, good to know, Chantal. So, Alex, there's always some risk of a legal action when, there's a business that's going on or a venture that has started, right? So no matter how much they have address the risks in order to prevent being sued. But then small businesses still can face, lawsuits from employees or even other employees, clients, or their own employer, employees as well. So such as allegations of trademark infringement, and, we talked about intellectual property, or disputes in buying or selling of services. You didn't sell me this wasn't what I was expecting. So things like that. What is one risk of getting sued as a small business owner, Alex?
I mean, that really depends on what the person or entity is doing. I mean, some small businesses actually, the EEOC, when you talk about employment issues and discrimination claims, there's size limitations there. Like you have to be over a certain size. I think that's normally 15 people to be subject to it. But I know of at least one corporate entity that for at least 10 or 15 years was under that number of employees. And then they turned around and hired some employees and some contractors for short term. Then they turned around and got sued. And then they ended up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and they almost went bankrupt trying to defend against that, all because they weren't paying attention to what was protecting them for the previous 10 or 15 years. So, I mean, a lot of it is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, being in regular contact with an attorney, just letting them know what you're doing that has some knowledge of business law and employment law can really help avoid issues.
Definitely, I agree. And so the importance of, I think you've pressured on the importance of the documentation. So you emphasize that point again and again on, the risk tolerance and having a legal attorney in place. So Chantal, I can do, or anybody can do everything right? There is still a chance that a business will be confronted by a lawsuit at some point in time. What happens if a business gets sued?
Well, the first thing, and I usually tell companies, especially when it's their first lawsuit, I was like, it's not a matter of if you're going to get sued, it's a matter of when. If you're in business long enough, eventually something is going to come up, and you're going to end up in litigation. So I would say the first thing to do is contact an attorney immediately, because there's always deadlines associated when the day you get served, when the lawsuit was filed, when your answer is due. It's a different deadline in state court versus federal court. It's a different deadline in different states, different jurisdictions. And so the first thing you want to do is speak with legal counsel so you can at least determine, when is my answer due? When do I have to respond to this and not be in default? Because that's definitely a situation you want to avoid. And then you want to talk to someone substantively to see, who is the right fit to represent your company in this matter. In the state of Georgia, I believe the only court that a corporation could represent itself is in magistrate court, which has a limit of $15,000. So anytime you're in state court, superior court, or federal court, you're going to have an attorney represent you, even if you're a company of only 2 or 3 people.
Definitely. And that brings us to, just because you brought it up, the magistrate court. So I do want to thank Judge Kirk for introducing you, Chantel, and she thinks highly of you. So I just want to let you know that. Alex and Chantel, this question is for both of you, right? So believe it or not, most employees are interested in more than just a good paycheck, right? Or a steady job. They're looking for someone the leadership who can respect them, have autonomy and room to breathe and show their potential skills out, right? As a business, hiring such candidates who have so much bigger in proving themselves and can independently work without a complete supervision, unlike the major companies that always have a supervisor over you. So even if they can be independent contractors, there should be employment agreements and all that. But my question to you both is, what qualities make a company good to work for? What should a person who's looking to go leave a full-time job into something that they can prove themselves, what should they be looking for in a company to go after?
Well, I will tell you that what I think and most companies should be aware of is that, we have the joke about millennials, and I'm technically a millennial, even though, I fall in that cusp range. But many millennials are looking for work-life balance. They aren't the baby boomers. They don't want to work 60 hours a week. They want to be able to take a long lunch. They want to be able to work remotely, even before COVID, work remotely 2 or 3 days a week. And so the ability to, especially once you get into the bigger cities, like in Atlanta, a New York, a Chicago, they want a company that they can grow with, that they can do really good substantive work with and get great experience. But they also still want to have a life and be able to take vacation and be able to, raise their children or spend time with their pets or whatever is their fancy. And so I think businesses need to be aware of that, because there are different generations in the workforce, and the younger generation is looking for something different.
Definitely, and I've definitely noticed that, Chantel. Alex, anything else to add to what companies should be looking for when they do want to join to have autonomy?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that having a good relationship with employees is key, like making sure to listen and respond to their needs. When it comes down to people's work-life balance, absolutely. I'm also a millennial. I think that having freedom, like giving employees freedom and liberty and autonomy, especially with the advances in technology, make the most sense. Making people spend, 2 hours commuting to work every day is not something that anybody I know wants to do. And with technology, it's usually unnecessary. And that type of thing can really, I think, create a better working environment for people.
Definitely, and I think COVID-19 has brought and have given a lot of thought-provoking questions for leadership in any businesses to think about. And Alex, I used to do 4 hours commute for almost 7 years, and then now I'm in that's how Vendorship started. So, each one has a story. So let's talk about accountability. Now that we talked about this is a good company, you want to be listened to, you want to have the platform to prove yourself. So what about accountability? Sometimes the performance matters, right? So how do we know, so what should we do when a person fails to perform, right? So should we have defined metrics or evaluation measures or anything before letting go of the person?
Well, I mean, I think that what's important is and it all depends on the size of your business, but I think that ultimately you need to communicate to any employees your expectations. I mean, you can't have accountability without expectations. Doing that in writing can be very useful. I mean, it helps the employee know what they're expected to do, and it reminds you that what you told them to do. And I think that by doing that, it does create, it not only creates accountability that you can point out when something's not being met, but it also creates, as we talked about in the last question, a little bit more sense of belonging and happiness and investment in the business, which ultimately those are the type of things that help avoid litigation. I mean, people don't sue their friends or people they're happy with. They sue people they're unhappy with or entities they're unhappy with, and oftentimes that's when expectations aren't set.
Definitely. Good for both the homework from both the employees as well as the employers. That's good to know. So even if the business doesn't provide expectations, probably good for employees to ask, like, what are you expecting from me? But again, these are normal businesses that start. What about startups? Sometimes even the leaders don't know what are the expectations in a startup. So is there any other advice for startups? Because it's very hard. You can make the expectation, but right here the startup is still looking for that seed money to invest, but they have so much they want to happen. So any other additional advice you want to give for startup founders?
I will say that I think it's very important for job descriptions, and people, especially startups, they glaze over that. They let people pick their own titles, and everybody's a manager, everybody's a director, but it's like, who reports to who? Do you have an organizational chart? Do your employees and contractors really understand who has the final say? And I think that once you've been in operation 6 months, you really need to sit down, and it's hard to do on the front end because sometimes you don't know what positions you need, right? But by 6 months to a year in, you should know these are the positions we need, and this is what is working and what's not working, and make clear written descriptions. And they don't have to be, very long. They could be one-page descriptions, but say these are the titles that this company needs, and these are the responsibilities of the persons in this title, and make sure that everybody is on the same page with that. Because that will save you a lot of headache on the back end, because you always have people, well, I didn't know that was in my job responsibility. I didn't understand that you expected this of me. And then the other thing is, I'm a big advocate for annual reviews. And I know small companies, they get caught up those first, especially 2 or 3 years, and they don't do any annual reviews, and then they fire somebody. And the person is like, well, nobody ever told me that I wasn't performing well. Well, everybody else knew, but they just didn't put it in writing. And so having those at least annual performance reviews, and be honest in those reviews. People don't want to put down in writing how they really feel about somebody's performance, but put it in writing so that you'll save yourself some trouble on the back end if the relationship goes sour.
Okay, sounds good. Again, you're emphasizing the documentation part about expectations and what is being delivered. So, Alex, the question I want to ask you is about, I think since we are already talking about startups, investors, right? So startups, again, every company, every business that has come up is because of either investors or the capital seed money that they've got. But what should a business consider before taking on investors? I think I sort of know, but I want to hear from a lawyer.
Well, I mean, that is not my major area of expertise, but I would say that what Chantel just said very important regarding having a plan, like having you don't want to start bringing in investors and asking for money until you have it written down and clear where you're going and what you're doing with the business, because those investors want credibility. They want to know that their money is going to be going to something good and firm and stable, that has a very good plan for success. And ultimately, a lot of one thing that just popped in my head earlier that small business owners sometimes forget, especially first-time business owners, is that you got to keep track of the money. You have to make it clear that that money is the corporation's money and it's not your personal piggy bank. And that's something that a lot of people forget when they start a business, is that the company's money isn't their money. Those are two separate entities, and it can cause huge legal implications if you don't remember that. And with investors, I mean, I think at that point it even becomes illegal. So I mean, you have to be very careful about that.
Definitely, very good point for to note for for businesses to have their CFO or someone with experience with accounting and financial background. So, Alex, let me ask you the other question.
I would
Go
say
ahead. Yes,
one more point on that is that what small businesses really, two things I would say that they need to certainly consider when considering bringing on investors is how much control are you willing to give up? Because once someone puts their money in, they want to have a say in the business. So what amount of say are you willing to give? And make sure you get that in writing. Do they have 49%, 50%, 30%? Because you don't want to be arguing with that on the back end, and that's not something you want to do a handshake deal over. And then the second thing to consider is, who are your investors going to be, and how is that going to affect any relationship that you have with that person or that entity outside of the deal? Because if the business goes south and your best friend gave you $50,000 of their retirement money, they might not be your best friend anymore. So you really have to be, think it through before you ask people, especially because most people go to their own network, right? They go to friends, they go to family members. That's their first line of investors. And you really have to consider, how much do I believe in this? And if it goes south, is this relationship going to survive?
Definitely points to consider. So, Alex, what are the challenges that a business has doing business with the government? Let's talk about the pros and cons. I know, reading your bio, you represented a few, but what are the top most challenges that you get when someone is trying to do business with the government?
Well, government relationships are tricky on a number of levels. One of them is just that, I mean, you've heard about the government shutdowns. Those are a real consideration. I mean, you're constantly at the whim of whatever a bunch of politicians, most of whom know very little about business, oftentimes the opposite of knowing anything about business, making policies and controlling money that if your main focus is government contracting, you're very heavily reliant on that. The other major thing I would suggest that's important to remember when dealing with the government is that you have to follow the regulations in your contract very, very specifically, because if you don't, I mean, there's criminal implications to that. I mean, you know, like when you're, if you're a little bit loose on something in a private deal, that may or may not lead to litigation. But with the government, if they find out, I mean, there's probably laws I haven't even heard about that you could be charged with or have civil or criminal implications to. So you have to make sure to follow all terms of any contracts and agreements with the government, anything you do with the government.
Sure. So I don't want to scare our clients though, because most of our clients are doing business with the government, Alex. But but we do make sure they follow and are being compliant. So Alex, tell us, you do talk about bureaucrats. So can you explain more? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm just saying that a lot of times it's very much dependent on, like, if you're entering a contract with a government agency in order to do something, you're very dependent also on those. But when you mention bureaucrats, the people who are in there, I mean, your relationship with them oftentimes will determine whether or not you end up with a contract. I mean, they have very public bid procedures, and you need to comply with all of those very specifically. But I mean, it comes down to, some people in the government, a lot of times, getting along very well with you. It takes people persons
People person.
to help make that happen. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, I feel good now because I think most of our clients, as I can think of, are mostly a people person. So, Chantel, how important is diversity? I think the last few months it's something opening many of our eyes, especially for those who are taking in advisory board members who are opening up their leadership level. How important is diversity, or should a company be scored? Or if someone's looking for a job, if they want to join the company, is it important for them to look at what's the diversity in that group?
Absolutely. Obviously, as a Black female, I am, or Black woman, I should say, I'm a proponent of diversity, and I do think that it adds value. I have litigated many cases with partners in my own employment group at Taylor English, and everybody brings a different perspective based on your race, based on your sex, based on your religion. We all come with our own diverse perspectives that make for a better defense of the lawsuit. And so when everyone is, monolithic or very similar, you miss different viewpoints. And also for a lot of government contracts, you get points for diversity, or they require some sort of diversity. And I'm not a box checker. I don't want you to hire me because I'm a Black woman, but I do want you to understand the value that I bring in addition to my education, being a Black woman, and how that can better serve your business. And I think that is something that has been shown time and time again, just the business case for diversity. I think a lot of bigger corporations have seen the business case and seen the financials. Some smaller businesses don't have time to run the numbers and to really do the analytics to see, is diversity helping me? But I assure you that it will help. And just in terms of doing deals, you never know who's on the other side. If there's a woman on the other side, lots of times they will connect better with another woman. If is a white male on the other side, lots of times they will connect better with a white male. So you want to have diverse people on your team to help you close whatever deal you're trying to close.
Definitely, and I can vouch for that, Chantel. I know at least the county governments that our clients have been winning contracts have been asking for their EEO plan. So many times a company, a business, even no matter how big corporate they are, they just don't have an EEO plan. That was never in their front burner. So this is something that the diversity law, the EEO law is trying to make them sit at a table and discuss their diversified approach to doing business. So Alex, before going to Alex, Chantal, one more question for you. So I know anyone who does business has some asset in their company, right? Either a product or a service or a reputation. So how, and anytime, like they say, a reputation can be tarnished, especially in a business, right? There might be competitors, there might be someone who doesn't like you. But anyway, what I want to ask you is, how can one protect the name of their business? Should they do a trademark? Can you just tell us more?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, trademark IP is huge. You want to make sure that you have patents, having your intellectual property team and doing it early and regularly, assessing what do we have that needs to be trademarked or needs to be patented. Because what you don't want to do, what people usually do, is wait until their product or their business model is successful and then try to patent it on the back end. And then somebody else is like, well, you've been doing that for 3 years. We've been doing that for 4 years, or we've been doing that for 2 years. And now you've missed the window to get that trademark or get that patent. Or what companies do is they will name their products and not have someone else do a patent search or a trademark search. And then after a year of marketing their product, they realize that they can't get a trademark because it's too close to somebody else's trademark. So you want to do that research on the front end before you invest in marketing your business, and then only to learn that you can't get those legal rights to protect it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. That's important. So Alex, tell us your relationship with the executive team or your board in the company, if you have one. But basically what I'm trying to get is, what are the unique talents you bring to the group?
The unique talents that I
to your group, to your business firm, yes.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I am very much about organizational processes and focusing on a lot of the things that we talked about earlier regarding making sure there's clearly defined roles and just setting the greater vision in addition to directing that, because ultimately the organizational roles that people have and the way the processes are set up make it so that the organization can continue even without any one individual. I mean, that is, I think that's the goal of any, or should be the goal of any business, is that any person should be able to be ultimately replaceable, because that means the business itself has value. It's not just the individuals that are on the board or the person who's running an organization. So that I think is critical, and I think a lot of people don't, like a lot of business owners and people in leadership roles in organizations would rather make themselves the most critical, which may be good short term, but long term, it puts a lot of burden on one person, and it undercuts the value of the business or organization itself.
So I'm sure our marketing director Sabina is clapping her hands in the back end, because she always says, you know, Nazira, if the company can run without you, you've succeeded.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
Definitely. So, and we are getting there. Tell me, Chantel, a situation where a business team wanted you to do something which presented a significant risk to the organization, and how did you deal with it? Maybe you don't have a situation, but I think the question is trying to ask you, did you have to voice out something that you felt was not right?
I will say the hardest or the trickiest part of advising clients is when they want to terminate someone. And a lot of times emotions are running high and they don't care, and they're just like, well, I just want to terminate this person. Well, if you terminate this person, do you have a signed employment agreement? Do you have a non-disclosure agreement with this person? Do they know all your trade secrets and they can go to your competitor and or start their own business up and running with everything that you've taught them? And those are things to really consider before you pull the trigger and just say you're terminated. And can we, if you know the relationship is not salvageable, can we offer this person a severance and get some kind of release before you just summarily terminate them? And then they go out and hire a lawyer, and it's going to cost you way more than it would have if you had just allowed me to help you negotiate on the front end. And so that, and in some cases, employers have wanted to terminate people, and I don't think that it's a terminable offense. And I've also voiced that, at the end of the day, it's the client's decision whether or not they're going to pull the trigger. But don't pull the trigger when, there's other ways to fix it. And when you're just running high on emotions, give it a couple of days, give it a week to really think about it, and not take things so personally.
Definitely, and I think that brings to an important point about non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. And I'm not really sure if every small business owner or a startup has that with anyone they bring on board. But looks like from what you're saying is something very important that the business owner or the business should have, even for the founders or the co-founders itself.
Absolutely. And it's, you don't necessarily need your receptionist to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but it goes hand in hand with having an employee handbook, having a confidentiality policy, having a policy in your handbook that says that all property of the company belongs to the company, and anything that you create while you're working for the company is, property of the company. So you can't take what you've now created for Vendorship and go across the street and use it for, a competitor. And so those things are important, and most people don't think about it until somebody's about to get terminated, until somebody has put in their 2-week resignation. And so those are absolutely, especially if somebody's going to be in your brainstorming meetings, they're going to be in your marketing meetings, they will know the insides and intricacies of your business. You certainly want some protection from those.
Definitely. So, Alex, you mentioned political in the beginning. So this question is for you. across the country, as we see, we don't have to mention specifics. There are certainly many things going on that is sometimes politically motivated or has a political agenda somewhere or the other. How is it? How does it implicate or has a reference or relevance to an employee-employer relationship about being political? So, are you telling an employee or is a business telling an employee that you can express your political views or you can't display your political views in your, in your shirts or caps or hats? So, can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, can I force someone to wear a mask? So tell us who has an upper hand on this one, the employee or the employer?
Well, I think that, and this is definitely an area that's in extensive flux and uncertainty right now. I mean, as a general matter, I would say that like I would advise any business client to do their best to keep politics out of the workplace. Now, because you have no idea how that'll affect employees. You have no idea what implications of in your future. And honestly, I mean, it doesn't usually have much of a place there. It'll just end up causing more harm. It could cause financial harm. Now, when it comes to things like masks, that's another story because that leads into liability issues. I mean, historically, especially as a plaintiff's attorney, I would never think I'm going to sue a business over somebody getting sick there because it would be very difficult to prove causation. But right now, with all the different orders in various states, it makes perfect sense that a business may want to take precautions. Some businesses are installing temperature scanners on the entrance for when you walk in. I mean, you're having people sign releases, you're having notices posted. And I do think that is something where it comes down to the risk tolerance of the business versus how much they're willing to spend. But I would definitely not discourage a business from taking steps in order to try to prevent the spread of disease. I mean, the idea of a disease being political is, to me, it's completely illogical and harmful to society, but it's where we are. I mean, somehow it got there. And at this point, I think, though, that businesses need to be focused on keeping their, they need to keep running. I mean, after November, businesses and people are still going to need to have their salaries. They're still going to need to make money. And you definitely don't want businesses to go under because they didn't take precautions, and then a bunch of attorneys decide to sue them. And I think that goes a little bit back to the last question because it really ties into businesses need to get legal counsel and listen to legal counsel, because even when it's a situation where we haven't faced a situation before, we know enough about the history of people getting fired or not to be able to give good advice. So I still remember one of the first employment law cases I did. I'm certain that the other side, because I sent a letter in early saying there's a discrimination issue going on, please look into it. They did. And I thought I'd never hear from my client again. A month later, my client's calling me saying, oh, they fired me. And there was a clear retaliation claim. Like there may not have been a claim before, but it seemed very obvious that the employer ignored their attorney, just listened to their attorney, and then they just did the exact opposite. And it's important to get good legal counsel to navigate these times. I mean, it will save a lot of money on the back end.
So you did have good advice for the businesses, but what about the employers? Do you have any advice for the employers about their political affiliation even before November?
You're saying the employers themselves, how the
employees? I'm sorry, the employees.
I would strongly suggest that employees. Everybody. If you're a government employee, you actually have. If you are speaking outside, everybody has their First Amendment rights. So the government cannot retaliate against a government employee for speaking their mind, except in very limited circumstances. With private employers, though, in Georgia, they can fire you for any reason. I mean, if your employer is a Republican and you say you're a Democrat, they could fire you, or vice versa. I mean, it's they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to hire only people of a certain political affiliation. Because Georgia's an at-will state, and political affiliation is not a protected class. So, I mean, I would say employees should be very careful about discussing politics at work, with work colleagues, anything else. I mean, you just be careful, because I mean it's your risk. You want to risk losing your job or not, and
definitely a good advice for employees. Alex, go ahead, Chantal.
I will add what's a shock, and it shouldn't be to many employees, is that most employers, especially once you get into larger employers, they have policies on what type of speech you can say at work, what you can wear at work. They have social media policies. And people are like, well, it's my personal social media page. But for the past 10 weeks, you've posted at company events. You posted yourself wearing the company hat. You posted yourself, at the company retreat. And then you say your own personal political beliefs. And then everybody emails your company because they know where you work. And so then you get fired and you're like, well, why did I get fired? This was my personal Facebook page or my personal Twitter account. But now you have associated your personal account with the business. You have said something that the business obviously either does not agree with or they believe will hurt them financially. And it's easier to part ways with you. And so I think especially in such a politically charged year, when we have federal or national elections going on, you have to be very smart about what you're saying and how you're saying it. And also, just as an FYI to all, if there are any employees out there, do not go into a business and start friending everyone in the company on social media, because that's usually how HR finds out that you said something. Somebody that you have friended in the company screenshots it and sends it to HR. And so be mindful of who you connect with on social media, and once you connect with people, on what you post.
And even if you don't unfriend, you don't know who are your foes within your friends in the social media.
Right.
So this is a question that I've heard a lot of times. Like, can I post my? And I'm so glad you brought up the social media, because that was my next question to you, Chantal. Is, can I post my personal belief or politically or any belief that I have, but it won't represent my company? And I'm like, there's no way, because you are already known by that company to many of the people out there. Is that true or not?
It really depends. I will say, certainly if you post your political beliefs on LinkedIn, it's going to be immediately connected to your company, because LinkedIn is a professional social media website that's for networking and for promoting your business. I will say on like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, it really depends on what position you are within the company to some extent, right? The higher you are up in the company, the more, if the VP of the company says something, it's very different than if the receptionist or the mail person says something in the company. And also how much you have posted and associate with your company. Do you have your company listed on your Facebook or your social media page? And also, does the firm have a website where you can be looked up? Like for most attorneys, you can Google my name and find the first thing that's going to come up is my website and my bio from my website. So if you take my real name from my social media and Google me, you can immediately find out where I work. Whereas for some industries, it's not like that. So can they find out where you work? Are you promoted by your company? All those factors will determine how you should go about deciding whether or not you can post your personal beliefs or not.
Sure. I think, Alex, you wanted to add anything?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to social media, it's like as someone who's been self-employed, I mean, the thing is that maybe people don't like me due to my political beliefs. Maybe people like me because of them, but I'm not going to personally have any problems do that, and I accept the risks of it. But when you get online and get on social media, I mean, it is highly dangerous these days to post anything, because it has become a political tactic to put pressure on businesses or even governmental entities based on what you say. I mean, I think that governments sort of have it the worst in a way, because you have government employees saying things, public outcry says to fire the person, but First Amendment says government can't turn around and chill people's speech. So that is definitely a situation where there's going to be litigation. But with private businesses, if you're costing them money, I mean, you're on the way out. I mean, there's no reason to put up with that type of external maelstrom. And that's not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, people should be able to discuss politics without this type of backlash and losing their jobs, or having the company hurt. But that's not where we are at all. I mean, anything you post or even talk to a coworker about, I mean, it doesn't even have to be social media. If people at your office know that you're like some sort of hardcore like Green Party supporter, and your company hates the Green Party, you're working at some oil company, I mean, and you're violating policy, you might be on the way out. Even like that's just the way things are.
And I will just add in, it's not the post where you're like supporting your favorite Democrat or favorite Republican that's going to get you fired. It's the post where you go on ranting for 10 sentences about how you hate somebody, or you hate this person, or you hate that group. That is what's going to get screenshotted and get you fired. So it's not that there is no room for your personal beliefs. It's not that there's no room for political speech, but you have to be careful about your word choice and your passionate opinions, if you don't want it to, leak into your workplace situation.
Sure, and probably could lead to defamation lawsuits as well, right? So, we have a few more minutes. I do want to address some of the questions probably asked in the chat. But finally, can you tell us, and this question is for both of you, we discussed some of the main points about the importance of documentation, having a legal counsel, whether either in-house or hire an attorney when you need them. But how can a business how can someone assure a business to be compliant? And it can be rules, regulations, and all that. So we're probably basically sort of reiterating what we've discussed. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, I'd say that really is, I mean, it's all dependent on the industry, what it means to be compliant and what types of things that you may need to look out for. But the way to really do that is, I mean, I know that business owners, I still remember this from talking to people over the years, that they're afraid of talking to attorneys. They think they're going to be charged a ton of money. They think that it'll be worthless, or they think the attorney's like telling them things just to for the attorney to make money. But what it comes down to is that, like, for something like a broad question or a broad issue like being in compliance, well, that business owner needs to have a relationship with an attorney and talk to that attorney. Maybe and whatever fee is worked out should be agreeable to both parties, but they definitely need to sit down with somebody that is legally trained to walk through what they're doing and what implications may come from the industry they're in and the issues they'll run into. That's really all that you have to do that. And if you don't, you're just asking for problems down the road.
Good to know, Alex. Thank you. Chantel?
I would agree with everything that Alex said. And I would say, when you're looking for counsel, try to find someone. I think most attorneys can issue spot, right? I have never handled a constitutional law case, but I'm sure I could spot a constitutional law issue. But to really give you sound advice, you need someone who practices in that area. For example, we have a phenomenal environmental attorney at my firm, and we were on a call this morning, and she says every time it rains in Atlanta, that's more work for her because of environmental issues, right? I would have no clue about advising you on an environmental issue. And so I think that, it's important. Yes, you want to talk to an attorney, but you also want to get to the right attorney and make sure that you're not paying for them to learn on the job. And that is somebody that you can trust, somebody that you have been referred to, or someone that you can do some type of research on to make sure that they are legitimate in who they say they are.
Definitely. And I think even 4 years ago, before, or 5 years ago, before anything about courts or lawyers scared me, at this time, I feel I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with, and because like that, you need to have experience going to the court, standing in front of the judge and speaking your point, speaking your role. In fact, even in our business, how we fought for our rights and why we were right and how our time was wasted and how we had to be paid. So at this point, I think through experience, but those nights and days were hard. I mean, going through being sued or suing someone the first time, panic, all those panic attacks and what's going to happen, no sleep. You guys don't see that because you're the lawyers, but the clients, they go through. I having gone through that now, with that experience, I feel like I'm much experienced now on what needs to be produced and how to be said and what needs to be said. And I think there's no fear if you're not in the wrong end, right? So that's the lesson that I've always learned. And so one of the questions that has been asked is, and you might have answered this already, Chantal, what are the basic yet important laws that an employee should be aware of at a workplace? It might not have been mentioned in contract agreement terms and conditions.
That employees should be aware of?
Employees should be aware of.
I mean, the biggest things for employees are obviously attendance policies, what is prohibited. A lot of companies will have a workplace conduct policy in their handbook. Those things you should be aware of. A lot of people, and everything is electronic now. They just sign off on the handbook. They never actually read it. Just at least read the table of contents. Know what policies are there. That way you can advocate for your own rights in terms of vacation policies and PTO. And you can be on the safe side in terms of what is the company dress code? What is the expectations around social media, around electronic communication. So those are policies that employees should certainly make sure that they're aware of.
Definitely, and I'm sure we should come up with the pandemic dress code as well. We've seen a lot of bloopers out there. So final question is for you from the attendee, Alex, is what does a lawsuit look like after a data breach that exposes clients' information, complexity, damages, and ways to anticipate, prevent, or resolve? And we've heard a lot of data breaches.
Oh, all right, I see that question. Yeah, I mean, if a company fails to secure data and it causes harm, I mean, that could be very costly. It all depends on what type of harm is caused. I mean, there are people who end up having their identity stolen, and some people end up in jail wrongly because of an identity theft. So it really, that is a very costly issue. I would suggest that most businesses dealing that, I mean, you need to have a good IT policy in place, and you should get insurance because if insurance covers it, they also cover the attorneys that will be handling the case, which could save a business a lot of money. I mean, if a small business gets hit with a data breach issue and people are significantly damaged, having their credit ruined or losing a lot of money due to a data breach, I mean, that could destroy a small business, and that's a good reason to have honestly to have good insurance that will cover that, in addition to good internal practices, because the amount of damages could be small, but they could be astronomical, and even paying an attorney to defend that, I mean, that you're talking tens of thousands, if depending on how many people, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and insurance companies can be useful for that.
Definitely, very good point, and I'm glad we are ending up in that note on what things can protect a business from doing its normal business. So thank you again, Alex and Chantal, for your time this afternoon. I hope the attendees have picked up a point or more if they already own a business or if they're planning to start up, or even some of the corporates. But Chantal, I can tell you this, that I do sleep peacefully because I know I have Chantal around in Vendorship. And Alex, we continue to wish you, the best, and we'll definitely connect even otherwise. So thank you again, and we'll let you know the feedback from the attendees soon. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.